Alrighty, we are here with 570 reviews to this story so far. Yeah, that's nuts. That's nuts to me. Like we haven't been getting quite as many reviews in the past couple of chapters, which I honestly kind of expected. But that's still an insane amount of.
Yeah.
That's like almost as many. Like I think that's as many as like my other long stories put together and then some.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, let's hopefully when we pick up the pace, we'll get a little more consistent again.
Yeah.
So, all right, first review. Light Hero Kaiser. Most interesting, great chapter mate. Can't wait for more. Kaito. Kurai has lost even more has lost it even more than that time someone tricked Boom Boom Boy into picking up that item by playing on his envy and hate for Izuku.
Like, hey, no spoilers.
I don't spoil anything at all. They know his Boom Boom Boy, his normal angry self, is tricked by someone I did not name to take an item that I also did not name.
Fine, well done. You're not as big of an idiot than you normally are.
Thank you.
Hero Light and Bow Hero Idiot. Impact signing out.
Okay. Hey, don't call me an idiot.
Don't come in.
All right. Thank you, Light Hero Kaiser.
Kaiser.
Guest. Kurai is starting to scare me.
Oh boy.
You're gonna.
Oh boy. Yeah. Let's see what you. Let's see if you think that after this night.
Yeah, we'll just.
This next chapter. Yeah.
We'll see how they feel after that.
Yeah.
All right, Joe Clown. Even I needed some time to come up with something to say here. Just wow. The mission was going so well, and then utter failure. The battles were so fun to read.
Yes.
Akurui versus Toga, Kota versus Muscular, Shoto versus Dobby. I didn't say that before, but I love his hero name, Freezer Burn. Is that canon?
No, it's not. As far as I know, Shoto's hero name is still just Shoto. Freezer Burn. So Bakugo's hero name in canon is Dynamite. In my version, it's Ground Zero because the circumstances behind his hero name came to be fairly different. You'll find out why he's called Freezer Burn in the future eventually. Do you remember why?
I feel like you told me this the other day, and I
I think it's sometime in the next couple chapters that we'll find out. It was, to me, it was funny. We'll see if everybody else thinks the same thing.
All right, even how Eri got one for all was amazing.
Yeah.
But the icing on the cake is how she went back in time. You basically pulled a Superman movie, rewinding the world.
So Superman. So in the Superman movie, Superman knew what he was doing. I want to say. Eri reacted.
It's more of a oh gosh, what's that show called? Psyche K moment where oops, I had an accident.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
If you guys haven't seen The Disastrous Life of Psyche K,
you're missing out.
If you need a laugh and you watch anime, you need to watch that show. It's amazing.
Yes.
Sorry, moving on. I can't believe that what I'm about to say, but she's more powerful than freaking Dio Brando from JoJo. Dio Brando from JoJo. And that puts her power on level with footing with Kai at this point.
You're not really correct. So allow me to put this to bed real quick. Eri is more powerful than Kai. Like, just flat out.
Well, she has an additional quirk on top of everything else.
Well, like, yeah, but like even with that, like, even so the doctor
at his peak.
Yeah, even at his peak, Eri would become more powerful than he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should he even call himself that anymore? Well, interesting you ask that. That fit of insanity at the end shows just how broken he is. Reminds me of your laughter at the resurrection chapter, to be honest. Anyway, this isn't the behavior for a guardian hero. Would do so maybe a new image / identity is warranted.
You're
onto something, buddy.
Something there, buddy.
Yeah, we're gonna let's stick with keep that in mind.
People are hitting on some good stuff in these reviews.
They really are.
Yeah.
You have to think there's death of something.
Yeah.
Something stays dead.
Yeah.
And we'll just think about that. All right. Next review, Silly Kita. Good to see that you're doing okay. Had me worried there for a bit. Don't ever feel like you owe us an explanation, though. We're just glad to see you're all right.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. It's been
a
wild few months for us, and we literally were forced to take a hiatus, whether we liked it or not, for a little bit. So glad we're back. Hopefully we'll be more consistent here on out.
Yeah.
We may double up here and there just so we can catch you guys up. Yeah. I hope we can. We'll see how. And I'm on summer vacation-ish. I teach summer school, but I'll be working less. So hopefully we'll have a little more time and energy. Yeah. Alrighty. And seeing as you've continued to put the effort to bring us entertainment, allow us to repay you by ripping your work to pieces with complaints and nagging. Oh, wait. Sorry, that's the Star Wars fandom I'm thinking of. Nope. Do not engage, Kira. Do not do it. Well, appreciate that. Sorry about this. In case you can't tell, I've been sniffing around the Star Wars sections of fan fiction. And surprise, surprise, people, both readers and writers, complain in there just as much as they do everywhere else.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. With all that being said, let's go into dissecting a story that I can actually enjoy.
All right.
So, I've got new reasons to hate Toga. Cool. Given that the entirety of Class 1A now knows about this, I wonder how that's going to affect Uraraka's interactions with the Blood Fiend going forward. This could get pretty interesting.
You are not wrong.
All of the fights in this chapter were pretty special, each for their own reasons. But I think that one stood out to me the most was Coda versus Waterhose versus Muscular. Sorry. Coda / Waterhose. That's a superhero name. Yeah. Versus Muscular. Sorry, my brain got.
Do you need me to take over this one?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Goes on to say, it's clear to me that you put a great deal of care and attention into detail into that fight, largely because of the way that the villain was defeated. Most of the other fights were fairly streamlined and simply boiled down to one side overpowering the other. Nothing wrong with that, especially given that it seemed like you had quite a few topics to cover in the span of this chapter. But with this fight, it really seemed like you thought about how Kota's quirk in particular would measure up to Muscular, and how far someone with his upbringing would go in order to exact his revenge. It was just really easy to feel just how driven Kota was to win. But you also did a great job at showing how hard he's trained for all of this. He thought each of his movements through and didn't get drawn in emotionally until the last moment when he knew that he had already won. Probably still wasn't a good idea to let his emotions rule him at such a pivotal moment, given that another villain could have been waiting to strike at such a moment. But Kota is a teenage boy at this point who's still carrying a lot of rage for the guy who murdered his parents. Yep. So I can't say that it was out of character. Really spot on writing for that portion of the chapter. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm like, honestly, I can't decide what was my favorite fight in this last chapter. Like, I want to say Kota versus Muscular was up there for me. Like, that one was really fun to write. But, like, there was just something special about Eri versus Shigaraki.
And for me, I like Eri versus Shigaraki's cool. I also, just the Todoroki brothers, because they're such compelling characters in general. And so
I wish I could have had more time to work on that fight and, like, all the nuances that went into it. But, like Kyoto kind of said, is, like, there was a lot happening. And I kind of had, like, I wanted to cover more of the fights that were happening. Like, I kind of wanted to just have Mirio throwing down with some Nomu or a villain or whatever,
gosh,
which would have
cool.
Really, like, seeing him at, like, the peak of his power.
But
like,
it also
that
could
really
have dragged.
Cool. Exactly. Like, I didn't want this one to drag. I needed it to come back to the present.
The pacing seemed to work for me.
Okay.
Like, for me who has ADD, it worked for me.
All right.
Let's see. Matter of fact, I might just give Kota the MVP for the chapter. Dude took out Muscular without putting anyone else in danger, secured a probable escape route for the rest of the team, and then did whatever he could to give Eri a chance to escape. I know that this time's Kota probably won't become a hero, or at least not that we'll see, but it was really cool to see him achieve this kind of potential, even in spite of how his story ended. Yeah, honestly, I'll be honest, I haven't decided what I'm going to do with Kota. Like,
in this timeline?
Like, I think, like, I may do a chapter bit. I may do like an epilogue chapter, like, that shows wherever the survivors end up, like at the end of when they become adults, like whoever survives that long, basically. But yeah, I don't know what I haven't decided what I'm gonna do with him yet.
Right.
I like the idea of Kota becoming a hero was too strong for me not to put it to use in some aspect, and I felt like this was the best way to do it. Yeah.
Let's see. Something that caught my eye in this was that it seemed as though this was Tomura Shigaraki, not anime spoilers, all for one in control of his body. Is that what's actually going on, or did the heroes just not know and assumed it was Shigaraki the whole time? If it is an all for one, how did that even happen? I assumed that he would have taken control by this point in time, especially if the heroes weren't around to mess things up for him. I'm very confused. Well, sorry, buddy, you're going to keep being confused, because, that was Shigaraki. That wasn't all for one controlling Shigaraki's body. That was Tomura Shigaraki.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. But, he brings a good point. All for one should have taken control by this point. So so keep that thought in mind. Something happened in the time in between the time periods that didn't allow All for One to take over Shigaraki.
Interesting.
Like he should have been able to. So keep that in mind, because that's gonna come up later. Oh. I have something fun cooking for that.
Okay, that's one I'm not sure I know the answer to.
I told you the answer to.
You did.
I told. It's been a while. I told you the answer, but it has been a while since I told you what it was.
I'm the perfect person to spoil things to because I forget everything.
There's one thing you won't let me forget.
Oh no, yeah. There's one plot point that someday in years and years you guys will someday hear about.
It's not years and years and years.
Feels like it.
Yeah. Let's see. Bakugo's last attack as the Oppenheimer impact was way too perfect. Maybe we'll get to see him do it again in this timeline, minus the user's death, hopefully. We'll see. Let's see. Akudori almost taking out Shigaraki and then failing was the biggest gut punch of this future past arc. Awesome callback to the hero killer, by the way, using his quirk like that. Man, Shigaraki hated that guy.
Yeah.
So to use that quirk in particular, damn. Akudori being his usual savage self at every opportune moment.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, every opportune moment, this boy will be savage. But he got so damn close to winning. Even so, it makes sense that Eri would need some kind of catalyst to force a global rewind, which was probably the only way to send her back in time without it being, to borrow the phrasing of some other reviewers, an Akudori ex machina. Seriously, though, although since Akudori was the one to give her the quirk, does this still count? I don't know. Does that count as an Akudori ex machina?
I don't know.
I don't think he planned for that. I just think he was throwing a Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't do that on purpose. Let's see. I expected to be more upset about him dying in the future, but surprisingly, I'm more or less okay with how it went down. I mean, it took a full-powered Shigaraki to do him in, and nothing less. That's pretty hardcore. There's also the thought that if the current Akudori hears about any of this, there's no way he's going to leave himself vulnerable to a similar fate. He'll figure something out to avoid a similar loss. Of that, I am certain, and I look forward to seeing just what that might be. Man, these guys are hitting some good points with these reviews. Oh, man. So many spoilers I want to give out, but I'm not going to do it. Let's see. I honestly feel pretty neutral about the way the future Eri ended up in this time period. I agree it is what needed to happen to move the story forward in this fashion, and I kind of prefer this method to a time machine built by Akudori, but I hope that this doesn't become a fallback plan for the heroes anytime something goes wrong. I doubt you're going to create a storyline where all the tension is so easily neutralized, but it seems like the possibility is there now. Yeah, you're not wrong. The possibility is there that she could potentially undo every mistake that ever came about.
But I think that she's going to kind of learn from this experience.
Yeah, like as we've noticed that things are not unfolding the way that she thought that they would. Mm-hmm. Like there are certainly consequences to the decisions that she's made, and things might end up being worse off because of them.
Yeah.
Let's see. So. Yeah, just because the possibility for something is there doesn't mean I'm always going to jump on it. Mm-hmm. Let's see. As for the last scene, geez.
And I think at the end of the day,
No, go ahead.
Last little note on this. Anytime you have a single instance of time travel, the way I see it is, it's almost like Flashpoint, where that individual who committed to the time travel and created an alternate timeline, they have any infinite number of alternate timelines that they could have or may have created. But the story that we are hearing is from the timeline where it didn't happen, where that was the single event.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it.
Okay, interesting.
And so there's infinite timelines, possibly, because this is fan fiction and it could go any way.
This is true.
Just like in The Flash. But this just happens to be, the way I look at it, this just happens to be the timeline where she did it once and realized, oh crap, maybe
this may not have been a good idea.
Do the best thing here, and she decides she's going to have more scruples moving forward.
We'll get to that though. Let's see. As for the last scene, geez, how do I put how I feel about this? Not bad, I promise. Kurai has endured a lot. There's no arguing that fact. I suppose I just assumed that if he was going to crack under the pressure of everything, he would have done it some time ago. And I think we've even seen some hints of this mental breakdown long before now. But he never caved before this. I guess I had just come to a place where I assumed nothing was going to break him, and now that he clearly is, I can only wonder what's going to become of him. There's especially the issue of someone so unstable having one for all to use as he sees fit. Oh boy. You guys are, oh man. Yeah. Alright, this next arc's gonna be interesting. Something tells me that this story is about to get real interesting from a very different angle. Bring it on, Mataris. As always, I wish you happy writing.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Silikita.
Thank you for the review. Yeah, let's see. Alright, Silver 4700. Alright, let's see what we have to say. I don't really know what to think of this chapter. Or the last one, for that matter. They're interesting, sure, but if I'm being honest, I didn't really feel connected to any of the events that were happening. Maybe it's because it's a flashback and I knew all that happened ultimately wouldn't matter because we're going back to the present where the characters are given a chance to fix everything. Okay, yeah. So maybe even if it doesn't lend an emotional connection, I would still hope that it lends context to why Aerie's done what she has done.
Yeah.
I think it's important in that fashion.
That's the way I sound when I'm turning off my emotional lens because I can't handle being emotional about a story. That is exactly how I sound when I'm doing that.
Alright. Let's see. With that in mind, I genuinely don't have a whole lot to say or critique about the events in this chapter, aside from the fact that a lot of characters, like Todoroki and even Bakugo, had their big ultimate sacrificial moment, and the writing played that up. It was cool, and it was alright. But I didn't really feel connected to either moment because, again, I didn't really care and was just wondering how these events would lead to Aerie getting one for all and coming to the present. And speaking of one for all, I'm with Kai on this one. Maybe it was just the expectation that the entire reason Aerie came back in time was by design and that they really needed Kai and more specifically one for all, as much as I genuinely don't like that reasoning. I mean, how do I put, there's only so much reasoning that can go into a situation like that where you may not be emotionally invested in this, but Aerie is. You got to think about it from that angle. Aerie wants to see her hero again. In her head, when Kai and Deku were alive, things were on the up and up.
For me, it speaks to her humility in a way because in her eyes, everything started going bad when he died, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really clicking with her that it's not really him, it's one for all leaving. That was the problem. And she doesn't see that having this power actually means she can change. She doesn't trust herself. She's still really young. She doesn't, she's...
You actually hit on something that I hadn't thought about up until now. She's kind of in the mindset that Deku was when he first inherited One for All. He kept thinking about it like it was All Might's power. And as Aerie's concerned, Aerie may not necessarily think of it as Kai's power or even Deku's power, or even All Might. She's just like, this power came to me so that I could do this thing, not so that I could affect all the changes that need to happen.
Yeah. So she doesn't think of it as
she's
being
borrowing
about her.
She's still in that sense of
Exactly.
I'm borrowing the power.
It's brand new to her.
Yeah.
She's in her head, she's only had it for a week?
A couple of weeks.
Yep. And so this is all new. She's in this alternate timeline. She doesn't even know where to start introducing herself to all these people. How are they going to believe her? And of course
to her it's like the only way they're going to believe me is if they see what I can do and how I do it.
And she doesn't see herself as the hero of the story.
No. Even
though she now possesses the key to being the hero of the story.
Yeah.
And she wants it to be Kai. She's kind of in that mindset where she still wants to be that little girl who experiences a world where he was where he lived. And like he's still the big hero in her mind, even though at this point she's got the responsibility to be that hero.
To her it's like he's still the guy who like just bleeding out all over the place so that Chisaki can't touch her. You know, Deku's the one who took her up into the sky away from all of her captors. The two of them put together, they just annihilated the guy who made her life hell.
Yeah,
like,
so
that's her first.
In her head, like if he's not gone, then the world won't go to hell like it did, and then I can live my life, you know. And she doesn't, you know. Ideally, especially in Kai's
she's
mind,
not thinking this whole thing through.
Exactly. It's a very emotional.
That's not her job as the character to think.
Also,
it's my job as the writer to think things through, and you guys, like, I don't know how much you guys believe me anymore, but I do know what I'm doing. But yeah, Aries not going to make the best informed decisions. None of them are going to make the best informed decisions at any given moment. Like sometimes they happen upon it because the stars align or circumstances line up or they have the right information. But by and by, they're going to make the wrong decision a good number of the time.
Just like human beings do in general. And the best stories. If the character is just going to make all the right calls all the time, it's not a story, you know.
It's a narrative.
All right.
Anyway. It's not even a narrative. I don't know what that is.
That is Jesus Christ. Just kidding.
Yeah, he's the only one capable of making the right decision every time ever. So, let's see. Anyways. But with the way that it's written here, there really isn't a reason to bring Kai back. Since Eri came back in time basically completely by accident, that would have been a good way to introduce One For All back in the story, since you said that you realize My Hero Academia relies heavily on One For All as a whole. Eri could have been a new hero that develops alongside the class, maybe even help deal with the aftermath of Kai's death. That way you have both One For All and Anika without having to shoehorn Kai in. But as it stands, he has literally zero reason to be back. You're not incorrect.
Nope, you're completely right there.
You're completely right there, yeah. If Eri had been in a logical frame of mind, like, she would have realized I can use One For All. I can stand in Kai's place, basically. But she doesn't want to do. But as we covered, she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't think that she's the person to do that.
Again, you have to think about this. The story opened with him talking. This is his, it's his story. It's his story. It's the story through his lens, and this
he
is
thought
not.
It was the story of how he died.
Yeah, it's not the saga of the Volsungs where you have, and then he lived, and then he died, and then he lived, and then he died, and he lived, and he did this, and he did all these great things, and then he married so-and-so, and then so-and-so got mad, so he killed him. That's not the kind of story it is. It's not Game of Thrones. It's still his story. Yeah. And now, we're caught up. We've passed the point where he thought everything was over. How is it going to continue? Otherwise, it would need to be a completely different story if it should have just ended there.
Yeah. Let's see. It's not even something that I'm vehemently upset about, like with his initial resurrection. I'm just kind of disappointed by the overall reasoning. It's not bad, it just feels pointless. I don't know. Anyways, take a reference on the house. The following reference has been heavily modified for appropriateness, better taste, and my own sanity. Oh yeah, I can already see how this has been okay, alright. Let's see. In an alternate reality. Bakugo. Communications, come in. We need a full report. Dabi, on the comms. Read the freaking paper. Communications officer. Hey there, Bakugo. Freaking read it right. Hey there, you fat whiny loser. That's more like it. Now keep going. Me and my friend Shigaraki are killing all your men and turning them into nomus. So I hope you've made peace with yourself, because when I find you, I'm gonna... Oh, crap. Dabi readying his cry. Keep reading or I burn you even more. Communications sobbing uncontrollably. Because when I find you, I'm gonna burn every feature you've got. You ain't finished yet. So prepare your weak little face for my hotter than Matt Mercer flames. Now pardon me while I burn this loser's brains out. Oh crap, no! Fire noises.
Is that supposed to be an abridged Krillin voice?
No.
I don't even know what this is supposed to be. I don't know. I don't know any of
This is me trying not to laugh through this whole thing.
Oh.
Dabi laughing hysterically. Oh, his freaking face, man. Ah, crap. Oh, no, that crap is priceless. Hangs up. Yeah, that's a Hellsing Ultimate abridged reference. Okay. Yeah, we are. Yeah, no, he definitely had to edit that. He had to edit that quite a bit. Oh, man. That original scene is, that's a bad scene.
Okay.
Anyway,
I think that's it for reviews.
I think that's
it for
yeah, that is it for reviews today. So thank you to everybody for your reviews.
we really appreciate you guys continuing to support us. Even if you're not entirely happy with how the story is progressing, I can only assure you that it will continue to progress. So,
all right.
With all that being said, I'm gonna let you guys get on to the next chapter, and a lot of you hit on some interesting points, and I want you to keep those in mind while you're listening to this.
Start to fall as it turns to a pour. We're here again in this storm, but we've been here before. I see the street signs wanted, telling me that I had no other place I could go. Feel like I'm stuck in motion, can't find balance, I'm living in a vertigo. Everything is nothing like before. I've tried to hold it together,
The Dead Walk. Class 1A had dealt with a lot during the course of their first year in training to become heroes, but now even their teachers had to question whether they were about to be pushed past an acceptable limit. In the last hour, they had learned of a power that transcended time and the tragic story of its bearer who now stood among them. They now knew that All for One would threaten their world again in a different form, and that it was already on the move. Todoroki had learned that his eldest sibling lived as a remorseless killing machine, forged in the fires of hatred of their father. Weiss now knew where her family's true loyalties would lie if the tides of profit were to change. Perhaps worst of All Might and Deku knew the true extent of what their failures could have brought upon the world. Then again, the sight of their newly resurrected classmate, one of the now two holders of One for All, laughing like a maniac on the floor in front of them all after what had just happened and heard, might just take the cake for them. After a few seconds of this, however, one person decided they'd had enough of his inexplicable behavior. "Kurai, cut it out!" Mina shouted as she grabbed him up by the shirt and forced him into a sitting position. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? There was no point to her bringing you back. Did you not just hear what happens in a world without you? It literally goes to hell. Forget everything we went through after you died already." He just stared at her for a second before his giggling fit resumed, tears streaming out of his eyes as he continued to cackle without pause. "Guess he finally went and lost his mind," Kaminari said sadly as the others could do nothing but watch as their friend inched closer to insanity, an intruder that had been waiting by the door to his mind for quite some time, even if it had not always been as obnoxious an observer at all times. "If anyone had a right to it," Jiro said in an equally somber tone. Even so, it hurt all of them to see the formerly strong-willed boy reduced to such a starry state. Everyone's impending sorrow was immediately scared out of them when something rather unexpected happened. Mina, her face purple with anger, drew her hand back as far as she could, and then smacked Kurai across the face loud enough to produce a that made even Aizawa flinch. Kurai's laughter stopped as he kept his face turned away from them for a long, long moment. He slowly brought his gaze around, maintaining that silence as he did, and further giving his friends an uneasy feeling when they saw the Cheshire-like smile on his face. "Thank you for that," he said as a bit of blood trickled out of the corner of his already swelling lip, while Mina kept a wide-eyed, furious gaze fixed on him. "May I have another?" "What is the matter with you?" "Lots of things, haven't you noticed?" He chuckled. He didn't even flinch when Mina drew her hand back again, but her next strike was blocked by Ida grabbing her forearm while he gave both of them a flinty stare of his own. "We deserve an answer, Kurai," he said firmly, though his tone was amazingly non-confrontational. "And I think we've all been hurt more than enough these last few days, Ashido. I don't want to see any of you come to more harm, especially by our own hands." Trust me, nothing is going to hurt me more than the fact that I am stuck here beyond my predestined lifespan again. Kurai smirked, though now they could see that there was no light in his eyes at all, as if he still possessed the gaze of a corpse. Actually, no, that's not true. The fact that I don't even need to be here makes it worse. He raised an eyebrow at his two close friends before he added, "Mina said that the world went to hell because I wasn't able to stop it, but that's only halfway true. The fact of the matter is that the heroes need One for All to defeat All for One, not me specifically." "But you are one of the ones who holds the power now," All Might grunted as he got to his feet warily. "It is your destiny and responsibility to..." "All Might, shut up." Kurai spoke with an angrier cast to his voice this time. He heaved himself to his feet before he stormed over to the thin teacher and put himself nearly face to face with the man before anyone could stop him. You're not the wielder of this power anymore. So you're saying that what happens is minimal at best, because I don't idolize you the way that Izuku does. But I suppose I'm no better, seeing as by all rights the power shouldn't reside in me either. It belongs to her now. At his last words, he pointed at Eri without even looking her way, startling everyone in the room. With another scoffing sound, Kurai went on to say, she's the 11th holder, and has her natural quirk to augment it, which means that she'll be more powerful than I could ever become. You don't need my help, you need her. She resolved to fight until the battle is done long ago, like everyone who went before her. Are you saying you're not among that number? Eri asked him softly, having seemed to be the least disturbed by the events unfolding in front of her. I was. Kurai nodded as he turned to face her directly. But my fight, a fight that I had no right to partake in from the beginning, is supposed to be done. Whether or not you were born with a quirk has nothing to do with it being your fight, Izuku said as he stepped over to side with Eri. Neither All Might nor I were born with powers, and we chose to fight anyway, same as you. No, not the same as me, Kurai said harshly, making his best friend flinch from the force of his words. I was lied to, told I had been born with a power that could shape any destiny that I wanted for myself. Turns out, that power was stolen, and sacrificed to me on an altar made of a family's bones. You both were lucky to receive your powers from those willing to give it gladly, not so with me. He paused slightly before he went on to say, I tried my hardest to make the best use of that power, and each of you can attest to that. And in the end, all it got me was a painful end where I left everyone I loved behind, and all of you with nothing but hollowed memories that would be forever tainted by my demise. You have a chance to change all of that now, Aizawa told him. You've been given a second chance to live alongside your friends to make a difference against the forces of evil that exist in this world. Third chance, actually, Kurai growled. I have died twice now, which means that I get to look forward to experiencing what is supposed to be a singular pleasure for the third time. Is life truly so unworthy of experiencing that you've been reduced to this defeatist mentality? Ida asked of him as he helped Mina get to her feet, who hadn't moved in some time. This, Kurai snorted as he gestured to the general area around him. This is not life. What we're living in is a pale and grotesque imitation of life. If I had my way, I'd soon as put myself out of my misery again and get it over with, but I can't, for two reasons. The first being that unless the taking of my own life would save another's, I wouldn't get to go back to being with my ancestors. I'd just get reincarnated, have to try again in my next life. Never thought I'd see the day where you'd be such a selfish bastard. Bakugo growled from the corner he had taken up, having seen the crumpling, defeated looks on the faces of many of the others at those curt words. Kurai gave him a flat stare before saying, the second reason I won't go through with something like that is because I know what it would do to all of you, and to Akururi. I wish all of you could hate me, truly I do. But because I know all of you after everything we've been through together, I know that won't happen. Even if I were to become a cold-blooded villain who has committed atrocities like All For One himself, I know that none of you would have it in you to hate me for it. And because of that, as much as I wish that Eri had never made it to my coffin, I will endure this life of mine for a third time. He gave them all another flat look as he added, but from now on, count me out of this fight. Kurai Hikari may be alive again, but Kai stays in the grave. You can't just, I'll find a suitable host to wield One For All, don't you worry, he said as he turned back on his classmates and teachers. I'll make sure they have a golden heart like Deku's too. I owe him that much at least. He started to walk toward the door when he felt a strong hand grip his shoulder and keep him in place. You know we won't just let you walk away from this, right? Izuku said in a surprisingly strong voice. We know that you're hurting, even if we can't understand how much, and that's why you're saying these things. But after everything we've been through, you know as well as any of us that we're not giving up on you, not by a long shot. Izuku? Kurai said without turning around, interrupting his friend before he could go on. I'm going for a walk now. Take your hand off of me. We're not done with— Wah! His words were drawn out into a sharp yelp as Kurai's left hand sparked with black electricity and grabbed Izuku's arm before a blur of motion and a blast of wind tore through the common space and hurled him through one of the front windows, broken glass flying out into the snow with the now injured boy. Uraraka let out a startled cry and leaped after him, followed closely by Sero and Ruby. Kurai's face was almost unrecognizable with dark hatred and contempt for the world at large as he made for the door at an unhurried pace, as if nothing had just happened. He did, however, warn the others over his shoulder. If I feel a scarf coming for me, I'm going to break your damn legs as soon as my quirk comes back, Aizawa. Leave me alone. The black-garbed teacher, whose eyes were glowing crimson, slowly lowered his hand from where it rested on the binding equipment as Kurai exited the building.
We need to get Recovery Girl over here to look at Midoriya, he said tonelessly to All Might. This just got a whole lot more complicated. We can't just let him go like that, can we? Kirishima asked of no one in particular. Shouldn't we try to stop him or something? How do we stop that? Kaminari asked as he pointed at the broken window. He just wasted Midoriya with one hit. They're supposed to be tight. Imagine what he'd do to us if we pissed him off right now. I doubt that he'll leave the campus, their teacher answered. He's upset, but he's not stupid. He knows how dangerous it could be for him out there on his own. I'm so sorry. Eri sniffled as her body trembled and tears fell from her eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to help. I wanted to save everyone, starting with him, but he's right. I never should have. To their class's continued collective surprise, Mina moved toward the other girl instead of pursuing Kurai and wrapped her up in a firm hug, which allowed them to cry into each other's shoulders. What's done is done, Aizawa told the future girl calmly. You acted rashly, now there will be consequences for it. Learn from your mistake and move on from it. Pitying ourselves is not a luxury we can afford right now, especially given everything that we've just learned. Sir, it sounds like you think she shouldn't have resurrected him, Ida said as he looked out the window with a haunted gaze in his eyes. You can't possibly feel that way, though, right? I don't think there was a right or wrong answer to the situation that Eri was put in, their teacher shrugged. All I know is that things have been put into motion that cannot be undone, and now we will have to react as best as we can. We will need to keep a close eye on Hikari, given his current volatile mental state, Nezu said, looking more worried than any of them. I hope that he chooses to pass on his powers sooner rather than later, but it is clear to me that he can no longer remain in the hero course, nor does it seem that he wishes to. I have some thoughts as to how we should fill his slot in your class, Aizawa, but I believe that such matters would be best discussed behind closed doors. Agreed. Hold on, you're giving up on him just like that? Ojiro demanded. You're not even going to try to talk him out of this? You saw what he did to Midoriya. Aizawa shrugged. Trying to argue with him would likely lead to similar results, no matter which of us made the attempt. It would be illogical to put any of you in harm's way like that, especially given that we don't have the means to stop him as he is. I sincerely doubt that Eri or Midoriya could find it in themselves to hurt Hikari, even after what just went down. No one spoke out against this, not even Bakugo, because they each knew it to be true. Kurai had suffered cruelties beyond imagining time after time, so the idea of adding to his troubles yet again was something that none of them could stomach, even in spite of the way that he was acting. They just couldn't believe the boy whose spirit seemed unbreakable had not only cracked but crumbled to dust, leaving nothing behind but the shell of a bitter animal that was hardly recognizable to them. They can't be right, though, can they? Kirishima thought as some of the others moved to clean up the destroyed common area with looks of shell shock plastered on their faces. This is bad, but God can't just be done, can he? There's only one person who might be able to get through to him right now, Ida suddenly said, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I hardly think that Ashido is in any state to... No, not her, Ida said to interrupt Aizawa, which was uncharacteristic enough of him to startle everyone in the room again. I wish that she could as much as for her sake as his, but the unfortunate truth is that she is not the one who can reach out to what is left of the man we all knew. He looked at Eri for a quick moment before he added, if she has the power to rewind people, then there is something that we must try. Kurai disappeared at around 11 in the morning, and it wasn't until nearly midnight that he was found, sitting beneath a cluster of snow-capped trees in the cold without any heavy weather gear, snow having piled onto his clothes and exposed skin. They nearly thought that enough snow had actually piled onto his head to form a small dome of frozen moisture before they both remembered that his hair was actually white now. His coal-black eyes were still dead when Aizawa and All Might approached him, both of them eyeing him like a cornered animal who was about to run wild. He said nothing in the way of a greeting, and he refused to answer when they asked if it was all right for them to come closer. They might have thought that he had simply died again if it weren't for the small puffs of steam coming out of his nostrils that told them that he was breathing. He wasn't even shivering, a sign of hypothermia, which could quickly turn dangerous. Are you planning to freeze to death out here? Aizawa asked him after a handful of awkward silences. I thought that was against the wishes of your ancestors. When Kurai again refused to respond to verbal provocations, there was a sound of rapid footsteps in the snow, following All Might reaching out and saying, Young Hikari, wait a... No, we're doing this my way, said a familiar voice that got Kurai's eyes to flicker over his shoulder right before a tightened fist smashed into his face, knocking him down to the snow with a slight grunt, blood flying from his lips before he lay on the snow, still unmoving. Ow, he muttered. Trust me, that's a lot less than what you deserve, jackass. Akudori snarled as he massaged his bruised knuckles. You should see Mina and the others right now. If you were trying to get nearly 30 people to question whether life is even worth living, forget trying to be a hero. Great job, man. People were actually somehow better off when you were dead. That's the point I've been trying to make. Kurai slurred, his already bruised cheek darkening to purple as he continued to lie on the ground without a change in his expression. I'll assume you know everything by this point, then. I managed to work it out. Most of it. In between people crying, his brother muttered angrily. I don't care what kind of suffering you've endured. I can guarantee that what you're doing to your friends is worse than any bodily injury you've ever received, even the lethal ones. He paused for a second before his eyes darkened further, and he added, but then, that's the whole point, isn't it? Even without sunlight, you're smarter than most, Kurai said with a twisted smile through his bruised cheek. By the way, did Eri rewind you to not have a quirk anymore so that you don't have a repeat of Island, or is that just too much to hope for? You really think you can make them hate you? Akadori snorted, ignoring his brother's second question. You're going to torture people who can only love you in aid of reaching an impossible goal? You're worse than the likes of All For One. At least he had the common courtesy to be born a sociopath. You're manipulating the feelings of people who you literally once laid your life down for. Seriously, you'll make a great villain one of these days. If you're trying to piss me off, you're going to have to try a lot harder than that. Kurai laughed softly. I could say the same about you trying to make your friends hate you, Akadori countered. You've hurt them pretty badly, that's for sure, but none of them hate you. Guess I'm not trying hard enough. You really think that making them hate you will what? Set them free of their ties to you? Akadori snorted. Grow up, big brother. You can't take back the time you already spent together, the memories that you made with each other. Those will always remain, buried underneath the pain that you intend to cause. And whenever they feel tempted to react against you, those feelings will always resurface to keep acts of revenge at bay. Everyone has a limit to what they can take, Exhibit A. His brother snorted as he pointed at his head, the first movement he had made since Akadori had punched him. They'll get there eventually. Akadori let out an animalistic growl before it turned into a shout of frustration that preceded him grabbing his brother up by his shirt and slamming his head against the tree trunk he had been sitting under as he shouted, Listen to yourself! You said that you're doing this to set them free of their ties to you, but the reality is all you're doing is drawing on their pity to further your self-sorrow. Say what now? Kurai asked with slightly dazed eyes. I don't think I can hear you over the dent you put in my head. Akadori let out another growl before he yanked on Kurai's shirt and slammed him into the tree trunk a second time. There, maybe that'll fix it, he snapped. Over his shoulder, he added, I'd stay back, sir, as he won't hesitate to pummel either of you. Aizawa tugged on his scarf as he said, We need to be ready for anything, including the possibility that you'll push him too far, or vice versa. We can handle each other, sir, Akadori shot back. It's what brothers are made for. Turning back to Kurai, he snapped, Let me reiterate so your dumbass can understand my previous accusation. Quit being a drama queen! Tell me what about this isn't dramatic. Kurai chuckled bitterly. Stop deflecting. Akadori shot back, actively fighting the urge to ram his brother's head into the tree again. He knew that another blow like that would probably knock him unconscious, and he didn't feel like waiting for him to wake up so that he could finish his lecture. Neither of us have ever needed the pity of others before, and you certainly don't need it now. Your attitude about this whole thing is so damn middle school level, it hurts. You knew that when you decided to become a hero, you wouldn't have an easy life, or death for that matter. You don't get to just suddenly tap out like a bitch because things took a bad turn. Before Kurai could get a word in, Akadori went on to say, No one is saying that what has happened to you is okay, but I'll take the time now to remind you that I've had to suffer even more loss than you, and you don't see me throwing a fit about it. You really think that our ancestors are going to want to let you back into the fold if this is how you're going to spend your days back on Earth? Kurai said nothing, but his eyes dropped away from his brother's accusing glare, leading Akadori to nod in satisfaction. If you want to quit being a hero, that's your prerogative, he told his sibling. I say it's a shame, but that's hardly my business of what happens with One for All. Give the quirk to someone who will make good use of it, if you please. What is my business is how you've acted today, when all Eri and the others wanted to do was help you. You haven't even thought about how Todoroki has been taking the news about Dabi, have you? Or how about Shinee finding out that her father's everything that she always feared him to be? Kurai remained quiet at that, but the other boy could feel his shoulders stoop with defeat as he asked, What's your point now? Get your head out of your ass, Kurai. Akadori snapped as he finally let go of his brother's shirt. There are bigger problems to deal with than your ungrateful hide getting resurrected because a little girl wanted to see her hero again. So let's get you on your feet, march you over to the dorms, treat you for hypothermia, and make sure you give everyone 2 apologies apiece. Why 2? One for dying in the first place and another for coming back. Akadori grunted as he forced his brother to his feet and started to help him stumble back toward the dorms through the trees. He stopped when he saw Aizawa and All Might standing in front of him, both looking cautious. "He won't cause trouble anymore, sir. He knows he's in the wrong, and now he's going to do what he can to make amends. Aren't you, brother?" He gave Kurai a side glare as he said this. The elder boy's eyes remained on the ground, but he did speak just loud enough to be heard over the wind and falling snow. "I'm sorry, All Might, Mr. Aizawa. Neither of you deserve what I've done today. I can't say that I understand the reasons behind your actions, but I won't fault you for them," All Might said, sounding relieved. "I can, however, relate to suffering in silence for the greater good, so whatever comes next, know that you will have your teacher's support. Break anything in the common space again, and I'll break your legs," Aizawa said dryly as he lowered his hand from his scarf. "Agree to finish the first year in the hero course, and I won't convince your new teacher in general studies to give you remedial lessons every day until you graduate." "Why do you want me to stay?" Kurai asked him warily, his eyes barely staying open as he finally began to succumb to the cold. "Doesn't seem logical. There's a lot more paperwork involved in exchanging students if it doesn't happen during a semester break," his teacher muttered. "We also can't have you leaving UA even after you transfer courses, for your own safety as much as the fact that I'm your legal guardian." "Yeah, your logic," Kurai groused. "Shut up, you're still in trouble with me." Akudori scolded him as he began to force his brother to march while supporting his weight from the side. It took them a while to make it out of the trees, and by the time they had made it back to the dorms, Kurai had passed out due to the effects of hypothermia and the beating he had received from Akudori. Everyone was up and waiting for them to come back, including Eri, who had been told not to leave the building under any circumstances while the search was on. The window had already been repaired, so the room was warm when Akudori managed to make it through the door and dump his brother's stiff form on the closest couch with a grunt. "Holy crap, he was out there like that the whole time?" Saro asked as they all took note of his frozen body. Only in the lights of the room could they now see that he had been suffering from frostbite, as evidenced by the spots of wax-like consistency on his skin and the red, swollen patches all over his arm and face. He still wasn't shivering, however, which meant that his body was not attempting to warm itself, even though he should have been responding to external heat by being in a warmer environment. He's got second-degree frostbite, Akudori said as he stepped back. "He'll need an IV drip to stay hydrated while we warm him up. Yairozu, can you provide those instruments?" "I can, but I'm not authorized to perform medical services under these circumstances," she said with a negative shake of her head. "I'm authorizing it," the younger boy said shortly. "I'm a licensed medical professional, so do what I say. It'll be fine." "You're licensed?" Ida asked, in spite of the circumstances playing out in front of them. "Since when? And how?" "Since you guys started at Nabu Island," Akudori muttered as he examined his brother's damaged skin. "I got bored with doing regular advanced academics after I got paralyzed and decided to try for an emergency responders consulting license. Seemed like the best way to get into the medical field with the time I had left. I played the dying kid pity card big time, so the schooling board decided to let me use my quirk to advance my education freely. After that, I started working on my master's in biology while majoring in engineering. I should be done with both by the end of the school year." After a half-second pause, he added, "What, did you think I was just sitting around while you guys were busy?" "So you're licensed to address situations like this one?" All Might asked, sounding impressed. "I'm not only licensed, I'm obligated to do so," the younger boy said as Yairozu began to produce the requested items. "I can just rewind him," Eri started to offer, but Akudori held up a hand to forestall her. "I'm obligated to make sure that he recovers, not that he's comfortable," the younger Hikari said in a hard tone. "The prick wants to be miserable. He can very well suffer a little physical discomfort after what he pulled today. And Midoriya, if you say one word in his defense, I'm going to throw you through a window." Izuku, who had been about to speak, promptly shut his mouth while Akudori took the needle and IV tube that Yairozu had conjured for him. He deftly inserted the metal into his brother's flesh and installed the plastic tubing before he asked Todoroki to dispose of them outside with his fire for sanitation purposes. Once that was done, he turned to Ochako and asked, "Mind helping me get to his room? He'll more effectively recover in a familiar environment." "Of course," she said as she moved to levitate her friend. "Feel free to bump his head into a wall along the way." "Seems like you did more than just bump his head already," Blake said quietly as she pointed at the spot where Kurai's head had been resting after he started to float upward. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise when they saw the blood that had stained the fabric of the furniture, including Akudori. "Oops," he cringed. "Guess I hit him harder than I thought I did." "What'd you do to him?" Kirishima asked with a deep frown. "I beat some sense into his thick head," Akudori answered quickly. "Given that he's here without throwing another tantrum, I'd say that's a small price to pay. He really had it coming, and if it's anybody's place to give him a well-deserved beating, it's me. By the way, do yourselves a favor, don't give him any pity points for this. It won't help anybody." "What, we should take turns beating on him like you did?" Kirishima scowled. "That's not manly, dude." "I'm not saying that at all," Akudori shot back. "Just keep in mind that selfish behavior shouldn't merit pity or coddling. He's not a child, don't treat him like one. He can take responsibility for his actions." You'd almost think that he was the older brother. Weiss mused to Yang as Uraraka and Akudori led Kurai away with Yayorozu's equipment, who nodded in agreement. The duo only paused when Mina moved to stand next to Akudori and say something unintelligible under her breath, which he nodded at. Sure, he answered. Just let us get him settled in. I'll leave you with instructions for proper treatment. Thank you, she murmured, her eyes nearly vacant enough to match Kurai's. Something about the way she looked right then told the others that their classmate was going to be in for a less than pleasant awakening after whatever he shook off the concussion that Akudori had probably given him. As it turned out, it took the better part of the next day for him to regain consciousness. Mina stayed in his room with him while Airi borrowed her bed for the night, Aizawa having said that for the time being she would stay in an extra room in the dorm building. The official report being given to the police by the faculty was that a student had been brainwashed by a villain into attacking the campus, and that they were handling the matter internally. This would keep the police from looking too closely at Airi while the teachers figured out a way to work her into the school's curriculum, as the majority of them were in agreement that it would be best if they could train her in the looming fight with the villains that they now knew to be inevitable. With regards to Kurai's resurrection, only about half the Hero Corps students in the student body knew about it, even if not how, and so they had been sworn to temporary secrecy on the matter, at least until they released an official statement to the press. There was another vote among the staff on the matter of allowing him to remain on campus, but Kurai's defenders won out once again, though even they were unsure of how much it would come to matter in the end. When he did finally come to, it was the late afternoon of the day that he had been after he had been revived. He wasn't surprised to see Mina by his bedside, staring out the window as the snow continued to fall. She didn't look at him, but she must have known that he was awake because she asked, "How do you feel?" "About half as awful as I deserve," he muttered, his cheek angrily reminding him of his bruises as it did so. He could feel burning sensations where all the frostbite patches had been bandaged by his brother the previous evening, and his tongue felt thick, making it difficult to talk. "Good," Mina said tonelessly as she turned to look at him, allowing him to see the dark circles under her eyes and the tear tracks that were still fresh. "You better apologize to Airi before the day is over, got it? She's been a mess all day and night because of you." "She's not the only one, apparently," he mumbled as his head started to pound like a jackhammer. "Why did you stay here all night after what I did?" "Because you needed someone to look after you," she answered. "Also, I needed to apologize." Kurai would have burst into laughter at those words, but since his head was killing him, he opted to raise an eyebrow and say, "Sorry, I think my ears are still concussed. Did you say you want to apologize to me?" When she nodded quietly, he repeated, "Me, the guy who tossed his best friend out a window, threatened to break his teacher's legs because he wanted to keep me from hurting anyone else." "I promised to be there for you and support you, even if I couldn't understand your pain," she answered him without breaking eye contact. "Instead, I lost my temper, and I took it out by hitting you. Even if I hadn't done that in front of everyone, it was a pretty scummy thing to do." "I deserved it," Kurai shrugged, but Mina was already shaking her head in the negative. "You never deserved that from me," she said firmly. She bowed her head toward him and murmured, "I devoted my love to you, and love should never hurt you like I did. I already apologized to everyone else for making a scene, but I need to say, I'm so sorry that I hit you in anger, Kurai. I hope you'll forgive me." Without hesitation, he replied, "There's nothing to forgive, Mina." Remembering his brother's words from before he passed out, he added, "I, on the other hand, need to know if you can ever forgive me for getting myself killed and for being such an ass when I came back." Mina straightened up before she told him, "I will, on both accounts, though I won't lie, I'm still going to be kind of raw from this whole thing for a while." "Fair enough," Kurai grunted as the ache in his head intensified. "I'm honestly surprised that you're not dumping me right now." Even as he said it, he realized that the termination of their relationship was a very real possibility, given how he had acted the previous evening. There was a very loud silence that stretched for several seconds before Mina shifted in her seat uncomfortably and said, "I don't want to break up, Kurai. I love you and you love me, but we've both hurt each other pretty bad. I know that neither of us will hold it against each other in the long run, but I think we could both do with some space for a bit." Kurai was expecting such words to feel like a solid gut punch, but instead, all he felt was a tired resignation as he realized that she was right. Both of them had made some serious errors in judgment, and they would be licking their wounds for a time because of it. Trying to act like everything was normal after what had just happened would only put extra stress on them, and while he didn't much care about what happened to him at this point, he did not want to wound Mina any more than he already had. and he knew that the same was probably true in reverse. With that in mind, he nodded his head, moving as little as he possibly could to avoid plaguing his skull with any unnecessary pain. All right. What do you want that to mean for us? He asked her. Mina appeared to think for a moment before she replied, I think we'd better stay away from dates and definitely no sleepovers or alone time in our rooms. I don't mind hanging out together in our friend groups, maybe even a double date setting if Izuku and Ochako still want to have anything to do with you, but don't expect anything in the way of flirting or getting cozy if we do. You basically want us to have platonic boundaries, Kurai summarized as he closed his eyes, the light beginning to hurt his sensitive head. A couple of weeks ago, he would have been floored by the idea of Mina being the one to set physical boundaries, but given everything that had happened to him, he doubted that anything could surprise him anymore. Yeah. She hesitated, then said, If things are getting to be too much in your head, you can come and talk to me in private. I won't deprive you of the trust that you have in me in keeping your confidence when you need it. Thank you, he told her, feeling a small measure of relief enter his mind. Naturally, I'll extend you the same favor. Even with that reassurance, he couldn't help but ask her, Is this going to be one of those awkward things where we pretend like we're friends for a while and then we just break up anyway? No. Mina sighed with a shake of her head, even though Kurai couldn't see her at the moment. I am your girlfriend. As we've established, I still love you, even though you're a dunce knucklehead. I just don't feel like getting very cuddly with you after seeing you treat everyone else so badly. Once again, fair enough, he murmured as his head continued to ache abominably. How long do we do this for? Mina shrugged before answering. I don't think this is something we can put a timer on. Maybe it'll be a few days, maybe it'll be a few months, but I know that we'll get there. Whenever you feel like we're ready to get back together in the way that we have been, I'll be more than happy to hear you out, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. Got it. He sighed heavily, already knowing that it was probably going to be a long while before he would feel like he had the guts to try and resume their normal interactions again. Thank you for making it clear where you stand. Thank you for accommodating, she replied tonelessly. She sucked in a deep breath and then stood up with her chin held high and her posture straight before saying, I'll tell Recovery Girl that you're awake. She wanted to check on you once you came to. Okay. He hesitated before he cracked one eye open to look at her before adding, See you later? Sure. She nodded, though her expression remained neutral. I hope you can make it down for dinner. I'm sure the others would like to see you up and about. You sure about that? He asked dryly. I tried to make them all hate me. That didn't stop half of them from coming in to check on you every half an hour or so all day. Mina shrugged. Do whatever you want, but even if you feel hella embarrassed, it'd be better to go down and face them sooner instead of later. You don't want to give all the resentment a chance to build up. Got it, he said in a small voice that told her just how much he was dreading facing the others. I'll head down once I'm cleared to get up and move around. It wasn't too long after Mina left that Akuduri came in with Recovery Girl and Eri, and he looked pretty irritated. I was planning on letting you suffer the full measure of your stupidity, but I realized that if we don't do something, you're going to end up having multiple areas of tissue death, he said as he took out his brother's IV drip. So Eri is going to rewind you back to health under Recovery Girl's supervision. Lucky you. Bite me, Kurai grunted. By the way, I passed on Ashido on the way over here, and she did not seem like a happy camper. I believe I told your dumbass to make things better, not... Ow! He rubbed his head where Recovery Girl had cracked it with her cane as she gave him a stern look. Your brother's had enough, Sonny, she warned him as Eri moved to Kurai's bedside. You told Eraserhead he's learned his lesson, so I don't care to see you rubbing salt in his wounds. Yes, ma'am, Akuduri said as he eyed her cane warily, keenly aware of the fact that while he had been able to smack his brother around without fear of retribution, as well as yell to his heart's content at the other teachers who had been shell-shocked by recent events, the youthful heroine was clearly a different matter. Meanwhile, Eri had moved to hold Kurai's hand and simply stare down at him, her power remaining dormant as she tried to find the right words to say. Eventually, she just went with, I'm sorry, Kai. That's not my name. Eri took in a deep breath before trying again. Kurai, I'm so sorry, she told him in spite of the fact that he refused to open his eyes to acknowledge any of them. You were right. I didn't need to bring you back into the fight. You earned your rest, and I stole that from you because I wasn't thinking things through. Please forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Eri, he answered softly, though he kept his eyes shut. Your only mistake was choosing to look up to someone like me as your hero. I wish that I was the kind of person who could be grateful to you, but I'm not. Really, I'm the one who owes you an apology for not considering what you must have gone through to do all of this. For that, and for being harsh to you, I am sorry. It was you and Deku who saved me all those years ago, she replied as her horn began to glow. And while his spirit lives inside of me with One for All, it was your will that made the final decision to accept me as the next inheritor, which allowed me to come back and have a second chance at life. You don't owe me anything, least of all an apology. Even though... No, don't, she insisted as she lowered her head and lifted his arm so that her brow could rest on his fingers. I stole from you, and while I can't give you back your resting place, I can give you something that might make your time among us a little easier to bear. White bioelectricity crackled along his body from her head for the briefest second, and when it was gone, Eri withdrew and let his hand fall back into his body. At first, all it seemed that she had done was to restore him back before he had submitted himself to the merciless cold of December, and allowed himself to be pummeled by his brother. His face was no longer swollen, and smooth skin stretched under his bandages, allowing for easier movements. It wasn't until he had started undoing the wrappings on his left forearm with his right hand that the others realized what she had done. Kurai, Akadori said as he pointed down at his brother's right arm, his eyes wide, having realized that he hadn't noticed it himself. Look at what you're doing. What? Kurai sighed as he looked down. I don't need these anymore, so I... Oh. His eyes grew huge as he lifted his right arm and wiggled his fingers, blinking as he finally registered the sensation of his fingers brushing past each other. His right arm had returned in its entirety, without even a scar below his bicep to remind him of his absence, as if it had never been gone to begin with. It feels so right. I can't do anything about the scars up here, Eri said as she tapped her own head. But now at least the League can be denied this particular victory. Her skill with her quirk had grown to the point where she was able to rewind individual traits of a person's body without affecting the rest of them, such as erasing someone's quirk or regenerating lost tissue without rewinding a person's body all the way back to before the injury itself had occurred. In this case, Kurai's arm was in the same shape it had been when he lost it, but he still retained One for All and the other scars that his body had accumulated in the days since his injury. Eri, Kurai said as he swung his legs out of bed and stood up in front of the girl, who immediately quieted herself and looked at him with uncertainty. Then she let out a gasp as he moved to embrace her while he told her, "Thank you for this. I don't deserve it, but thank you." Yeah, you definitely don't deserve that, Akadori agreed, though he held up his hands in a gesture of surrender when Recovery Girl threatened him with another hit from her cane. He also added, "I am glad to see you in one piece, though. Eri, thank you for doing that." Consider it an early Christmas present, she mumbled into Kurai's shoulder. Kurai then let Eri go as she pulled back so that she could look at Akadori and say, "Thank you for entrusting me with your brother's power. I know it wasn't actually you who did it, but since I can't thank you in the future, I want to say it now." Akadori, instead of protesting that she didn't need to do that, like Kurai expected him to, merely inclined his head in acknowledgement of her thanks. "I don't think it was my decision entirely, but I am glad that you grew up to be someone who could inherit the power and use it like a real hero. I'm sure Togata from both the future and present are proud of you." "Lemillion always told me that I would be the hero who would undo a million tragedies," she said before she looked back at Kurai, who was staring at his right arm and massaging it with his left, as if afraid that it might vanish on him again. "Maybe I have, but I feel like I only managed to cause a new one in place of them." "One tragedy weighed against a million is nothing," Kurai said without looking over. "Even as I am now, I know that well enough." "Then why did you act out like you did?" Recovery Girl asked him. "Does a wounded animal rationalize its actions when it's in pain?" The formerly crippled boy replied, finally looking up from his restored flesh. "You think you're an animal? From my experience, pain reduces everything with some form of awareness to the same level of intelligence." Kurai shrugged when Akadori glared at him again before saying, "I'm not excusing what I've done. I'm only saying that my actions had no reasoning behind them, so don't go looking for one beyond the old saying, misery loves company." "Eri, I might need you to rewind him again in a second," Akadori said as he started forward, only to be held back by Recovery Girl and Eri both. "He's your brother, but my bringing him back is what did this to his spirit," the time traveler asserted. "I'm partially to blame for what he's done." "Enough of the blame game, kids," Recovery Girl said as the teenagers recoiled, rubbing their sore heads as she lowered her cane. "Enough talking about who should take responsibility isn't going to help anyone, especially you three." If you're planning to do something about all the trouble you've each caused, then get to work doing something about it instead of just arguing in circles. Honestly, all of this should have already taught you that you never have enough time in the world to do what we need to do, so stop wasting what you do have. At those words, Kurai, Akurui, and Eri each looked a little shamefaced, but it was the eldest of them who said, all the actions in the world won't undo my actions, my words, and what I've already done. I wouldn't even know how to start. How do you even function in that funny little head of yours? Akurui asked him through half-lidded eyes. If you don't know where to start, you might want to think about asking the people you hurt how they want you to make amends. Kurai stared at his brother for a moment before he nodded slowly. You're right, he agreed somberly. Can't fix something if I don't know what the problem is, right? Yep, and if you start on another tangent about how even if you spend the rest of your life atoning for your mistakes, that it won't be enough, I'm going to put this IV where the sun don't shine, his brother said with a frosty smile as Eri blanched. Got it, Kurai said as he raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. So I guess now I need to ask, what can I do to make amends for my crimes against you, smartass?
In the shadows I've grown, in my struggles I've shown, I'll never back down for anyone. You think that this is the end, I've just begun. Through my life I've been gentle, but I know it's in my mental. Stop, need a moment, a component. I try to show it, so soft-spoken. Am I broken? No. Who's my next opponent? Every moment pushes me to focus harder, show I can do anything I set my mind to. No obstacle I can't push through.
So, I had to go to a very dark place to pull off this chapter.
Yeah, so I think the first time you read me this chapter, it was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me as your wife,
Mm-hmm.
it's because, you're getting better and better at creating dynamic characters that are not, based on you or but they still have little
They all have pieces of me
you.
in them.
All of your original characters have
This
some.
is the most of myself that I have intentionally put into Kurai.
Yeah, and I think because I've watched, I don't know if this is getting too personal, but I've watched you come in and out of some real dark places because I've known you for 12 years now, I think.
Just about, yeah.
I've watched you in some of your darkest times and kind of coming out of those and recovering, and just the way you describe his body language, the way his voice changes, the way, just everything was
voicing him in particular this chapter was a challenge.
It was so familiar that the first time you read it to me, I just bawled my eyes out because it was just too close to home.
Yeah.
And so just because I know you and I know where it's coming from, that was hard.
Yeah. I was like, this is this. We've come upon the point where this is the breaking of his sanity.
Mm-hmm.
Kurai is no longer in his right mind.
So I think when the last time you said this was the chapter that was coming up, I was like, oh, I have to listen. But this time around, it wasn't as hard because I'm not as close. It's different hearing it the second time.
Okay.
And you've added and embellished it a little bit too, which I think I enjoyed it more the second time through.
Yeah.
So we open. Yeah, that being said, in the chapter we open with the
opening scene. The opening
scene.
scene, so originally I was gonna have myself doing a laugh track basically in the background, basically laughing as the description of what's happening is going on. So basically you're just having his insanity going in the background, but I couldn't get myself to.
The audio mixing was.
No. The audio mixing wasn't the problem. I couldn't get myself to laugh that convincingly. It came out really forced, and I was like, I'm not gonna put this. I'm not gonna put this in there if it's not gonna work.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I tried to find stuff that would make me laugh, but none of it came out correctly.
It's not the emotion that you're trying, because it's almost like a laugh out of incredulity. Because
he's laughing at how stupid his circumstances are.
Yeah.
He's just it's like, well, it's like the closest thing I can think of is there's a bit in Team 4 Star's first season with Dragon Ball Z Abridged when Vegeta gets his tail cut off. And he's just like, I thought I'd be angrier with the loss of my tail and the utter humiliation of this defeat. But he's like, but maybe I've just become so unbelievably angry that I've come full circle. Either way, time to kill you all. He's just like, he's come full circle at this point. Like he's still furious, but now he's just like his brain is broken. He's
being a brat, but
he's being a brat.
But at the same time, it's like his.
There's a reason I drew him looking that insane there.
And I mean, there's a point where your brain legitimately cannot handle the stress of trauma, and
so it fragments itself.
And like important, rational functioning aspects just kind of turn off. That prefrontal lobe's like, nope, not doing this. This takes too much energy, because your body is literally trying to fuel the energy to deal with the trauma, and it doesn't have it. So that your brain just it doesn't. You can't. And so of course, poor Deku ends up out a window. He tells All Might to shut up, which kills me. I'm like, no.
I was like, this chapter was just like, all right, Kai is just like a absolute dick in this chapter.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like there's hardly anything left of what remained. Like toward the end, we see him trying to make an effort to come back.
Yeah.
But it ain't gonna be a one and done thing. Like this is gonna be a long process of recovery if indeed he can recover from this.
So of course he takes off. You kind of see where Ida is able to kind of step in as that.
Yeah, I really like doing that bit with Ida where he's he's not as close to Kurai anymore as some of the others are.
But he knows him the longest. Yeah, he's watched him go through every serious trial, and he knows from experience. It's like, no, I know who needs to talk to him now.
So I'm hoping that this is somewhat the saving grace of the chapter, and that we get our Savage Boy back on his feet.
I'm curious to hear what they think of that, because I'm like, they love him. At the same time, I'm like, are they going to be mad that he has it's not a full recovery, because he still has the quirk and he still has the issues with his brain. So it's only a matter of time before he's in a wheelchair again.
Yep.
But
he talked about this back before they went to Naboo Island. I mean, we might have touched on this last podcast, but he in the future he allowed himself to continue being rewound because he was one of the things keeping the Alliance alive.
Yeah.
So he didn't see that he had a choice. In this scenario, though, he may not allow himself to continue being rewound, because he already expressed that he had issues with issues with the morality.
I think the only reason he allows it to happen this time is that he's worried about what his brother will do if someone doesn't stop him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can tell that
the issues outweigh his morality.
Yeah.
His morality conundrum.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, well, what's more important?
Yeah.
Me sticking to my guns on this subject, or keeping my brother from doing something he'll regret and hurting people?
Yeah. And we still see that Kurai has some level of reasoning.
Because he's able to walk away.
Well, it's not even that. He talks about he's like, no, I don't want this. He's like, I should not have this power. I don't want this power. Even if he doesn't say I shouldn't be the one to have this power, he's like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
He's like I'm done doing this. He's like all the bitterness that he's been keeping repressed is finally coming out. Like he just has no filter. He goes off on Deku and All Might. Like they don't deserve what he told them and the way that he told them. But the problem is that he's not entirely incorrect. Because he tells him, he's like, you guys were given your powers. Like the line of one for all, that's been passed on through necessity. But All Might was the first one to receive it because his master brought him up. He was the first person to be trained to receive one for all. Everybody else was passed on in the middle of a battle, or because the original user was dying. Nana Shimura invested her time. She trained him. She realized this guy could be what we need. And then he did the same thing with Deku. So for both All Might and Deku, it was passed on to them willingly and by people who knew that they were going to use it. Kurai didn't get his power that way. He was used as a bargaining chip in a transaction.
And,
he was able to do good things with his power. And he's able to, and so nothing that he said was incorrect while he was going off on everybody.
He shouldn't be throwing himself a pity party, but at the same time, who can blame him in this situation?
Yeah. Well, that's the problem that like everybody else is just like, what do we do with this? Like some of them are like, we should go after him, and then there's Kaminari who's like, did you see what he just did to Midoriya? It's like, what are we supposed to do against that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like he's down an arm again, but nobody in that class is stupid enough to think, yeah, we could take him.
Oh, no. I mean, even Aizawa, I think that's what surprised me the most, is that Aizawa's so, like, on top of his students, but he just knew.
He knew that if he tried to restrain Kurai, the second that he can't keep up his quirk forever. The second he antagonizes him and is forced to drop his quirk, Kurai's gonna go off on all of them.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where it's like, if at all possible, live at peace with all people. It's like, let's
give him some space.
He needs to go cool down. We're gonna let him cool down. Like, yeah, you can tie up Bakugo and put him in and gag him, and he's still Bakugo, but this is different.
Bakugo has some level of rationale in everything that he does.
Yeah.
Kurai just doesn't have that at this point. He is pissed, and he's going to be pissed, and anybody who's getting in the way of him being pissed is going to make him even more pissed.
Yeah, he's very broken.
It's a set of circular reasoning, is what it is. He wants reasons to be pissed.
Yeah.
And he's going to keep finding them.
It's very much like
so it's like stay out of his. So basically, it's like he's going to keep finding reasons to be pissed. So either you can be the reason that he's pissed and he takes it out on you, or you can let him go be pissed on his own.
Yeah, let him
burn himself out.
Yeah.
Which is, I've been in that, I've been in that scenario, like, where my sanity has certainly been in question.
But thank God.
Not to this degree.
Not to that degree. You've never been violent in an episode. But that being said, it's like, it's the same level of emotional, like, intensity, and you've been able to but thankfully you trained yourself to separate yourself from that high emotion situation so that you can de-escalate yourself and start thinking through it. He is not really in a place where he's ready to de-escalate though. Until
he wants an excuse to he wants an excuse to escalate things.
Yeah, and So I'm very thankful that you've never had your brother has never needed to bash your head into a tree. But Akurui,
that bit with Akurui coming in, I was like, all right, it's gonna have to get like. Boys will be boys. There are just some times where we need to get punched in the face to set us straight.
Yeah.
Like, just saying it how it is. And the only one who was going to be able to do that without getting Detroit smashed into the stratosphere was Akurui.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that bit where All Might's like, hey, wait a minute, and Akurui's just like, no, we're doing this my way.
Yeah, and he handles it as only Akurui can. I think the one thing that I was confused about was how, like, okay, yeah, he got licensed, but he hasn't actually physically practiced placing an IV before because he's been paralyzed.
He's smart, he can figure it out.
That was the one part I was like, okay.
Fair enough. Maybe that was a bit thin, but you know what? He
got
got out of the wheelchair. He wants to show off.
There's a difference between having a mental know-how and being physically able to do it.
They have Recovery Girl on hand if something went wrong.
Alright, whatever.
Okay, whatever.
But anyway, I think then, okay, so we get it, he's kind of, being forced to face reality and be like, alright, where am I going from here?
Yeah.
And the part with Mina
my favorite bit was where Akurui tells Deku, if you say anything to defend him, I'm gonna put you through the window.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, poor Deku. Poor
Deku, poor All Might, like,
all of them.
All of them,
they don't
like,
deserve this.
No. Like, I was like, I feel like a really bad person writing this.
I know, when you said shut up, Albert, I was like,
yeah.
My heart.
Like, I honestly, like, I wrote the line shut up all night and I had to stop, and I was just like, I sat there for a good couple minutes being like, oh man, can I actually go through it?
Can you
like,
commit
can I
this
do
crime?
this to all? Can I do this to All Might?
His little heart, I can't handle it.
Believe it or not, this chapter originally had a much darker ending. I had to go back. I was gonna have Mina and him break up.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I wrote it
that
out
to me.
I wrote it out, and
you
like
read that version to me, and I
did.
cried.
Yeah, and I really had to sit with it and think about. I was like, okay, this is the direction I want the story to go, but is this what the characters will do in this situation? And to a degree, I could like. I kept it going for like another chapter and a half, but then I had to stop because I was just like, I'm forcing this.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I wanted to happen. But it just wasn't... The characters were becoming something that I didn't recognize.
Yeah.
Like, even more than this. Like, Kurai is becoming something that hardly anybody recognizes. But I don't know how to really explain it other than it just didn't feel like him anymore. Like to me, all these circumstances leading up to this still feels like Kurai to me.
Yeah.
Like, I can still write him as the same person, even changed drastically as he is. It still feels like him to me.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of thankful that you didn't do the whole breakup thing and
It wasn't even to me. It wasn't even going to be a cliche thing. Like, it just honestly,
No, it
like
wasn't.
they're at a point in their relationship where just them breaking up just didn't make sense to me anymore. Like, it didn't. The dynamic. The dynamic wouldn't allow for it. The dynamic doesn't allow for it at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that you went back on that one because I remember the version where they broke up, and that was hard. I was like emotionally drained reading it. And so I think there's so much going on that having that little hope that's like, okay,
maybe
like,
things can get better.
Maybe they'll work things out. Like, they're not really breaking up. They need some space. Like, he really hurt her.
She really hurt him. Speaking of mistakes, like, she did a big bad.
She hit him, yeah.
You don't hit people. You don't do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think coming from, for me, yeah, and it's interesting because coming from a background where abuse in a relationship is very common, that didn't really resonate with me a whole lot. I was like, oh yeah, he deserved it. She smacked him. Just because it was I was raised by a lot of man-hating individuals who are like, oh yeah, if he does something you don't like, just hit him in the solar plexus. This is how you do it.
That's how you kill people.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so it's like, for me, I didn't even bat an eye because it's like, yeah, he asked for that. But at the same time, I
was raised in a household where it's like, you don't hit your significant other ever.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
You never do that.
I remember when we were dating, we must have been like 16, 17 years old. And, I was raised with brothers. I'm used to horseplay and like shoving each other and punching each other. And like all of my friends in high school when they were dating, that's how they behaved with their boyfriends because they were friends more than anything. And I remember one time I shoved you playfully and you looked at me and you were like, no. We're not doing this. And I was like, dude, I'm just messing around. And you were like, no.
Don't mess around. I was like, you do not mess around like that.
You ever hit me and I'm breaking up with you. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a little like over the top, dude, but okay, whatever. I like you, so I'll try not to do that. And it was hard for me because literally it's funny too because literally every boyfriend before you I had drawn blood at some point because I didn't realize what an angry person.
You've drawn blood out of me. You just not
intentionally. But I didn't realize what an angry person I was and how that carried into my relationships.
Like for a bit of context, the reason I like my mom actually did something similar to my dad. She whacked him one time, and he just looked straight at her. He was like, "You never do that to me again." And like you, she was like, "What?" She's like, "What do you go?" She's like, "What do you?"
Chill out, dude.
She's like, "Why are you making a big deal out of this?" Basically, the way he explained it was, and the way that I explained it to you was that, like, like, hitting people, that's not okay. Like, that's not okay. That's something you should do
That's
to anybody.
that's coming from a martial artist.
Yeah, that's something you should do to anybody ever. But like, if that kind of behavior is allowed, for lack of a better term, and like just kind of put off and ignored, the problem is that even if it doesn't do anything on a surface level, it does things to you on a deeper psychological level, where it's just like,
that's the person
because
who's
if you
supposed to be your safe place.
that A, you're supposed to be a safe place. B, if you do that continuously, like, and that becomes an acceptable pattern of behavior. You know, a relationship's supposed to a good relationship is supposed to be equal in all ways, right? It's supposed to be give and take. So what happens when you start giving and taking? It's abuse.
Really, yeah. Like that
ends up with me. That ends with me going to jail because one day I snap and boom.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you are a martial artist, so you need to be extra careful.
Oh, my dad was in the military, so it's like the fact of the matter is like we can hit a lot harder than you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the idea was that don't enable us to, it's like, don't put us in a situation where we even consider the thought where that might be okay.
Like, you set the boundary. You set the boundary, and
like,
that was your
where
expectation. It's like, no, I will not continue in this relationship if you are going to be hitting me. And that's like a really good, So anyway, she crossed a line, and I'm sure,
Yeah, to me, like, her crossing that line, I'm like, that is a massive level of betrayal. Like, you don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, like it seems like such a small thing, but again, like, this is the most that I put myself into this character on purpose.
And I think that you also have to take into account that he is literally at the lowest he's ever been, and the one person he has left who's supposed to be on his team just assaulted him. And it doesn't make it okay that he just goes and assaults everybody else.
Not at all. I'm not excusing his behavior by any means.
But he's still that
doesn't invalidate her wrong.
And it also is contributing to the inner turmoil that he's got, And so he had it coming, absolutely, but it doesn't mean it didn't hurt.
It shouldn't have come from her.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have come from her.
So you're supposed to be, if you're in a relationship, you gotta, even when your partner is in the wrong, you need to be in their corner and then confide in them when you're separate and say, hey, then it's time to call them out and be like, in a loving way, be like, you know what, that was not cool, dude.
Like what she does toward the end of the chapter, that was the correct way to handle things. Like she's like, first of all, she's like, I did wrong, I'm sorry, and then she goes on to say, you owe these people an apology for this reason, this X, Y, and Z. Like, that's
she handled it very well. I was like, and she didn't get overly emotional. She said what she needed to say, and she walked away before she got.
Well, clearly she's already been having her emotions the entire time.
Oh yeah, and and I think she probably knows she's gonna have another meltdown, and she doesn't want to act on that, so she's just gonna say what she needs to say, and then get some space. And that's important because he needs to process all of that.
Well, she's like we're both gonna be feeling raw from this for a while. Like she's like, we hurt each other.
Yeah.
Like, so they need to take some space, and he's like, this isn't gonna be one of those things where we pretend everything's okay for a while and then we break up anyway. She's like, no. But this is why they have to take some distance, is because they can't pretend that everything's normal.
Yeah, because
it's not. And they shouldn't act like it is. But so this was a heavy one.
It was heavy.
This was
heavy.
Really There's
heavy.
A little bit of levity at the end where it's like she's like, okay, we're not breaking up, we're just keeping some distance, and then Eri tries to make amends for what she did wrong.
And for me, Akurui is just the highlight, and as he always is. Just honestly. He's just being best brother over here. He's just over here like, okay, dude, like
get over yourself.
I'm going to hurt you.
I love the fact that the guy who is the middle school age is telling his older brother, you're acting like a middle school drama queen. Stop.
Has that ever happened to you?
No.
No? I feel like your youngest brother may have called you out on some. He's the kind who's very silent and then all of a sudden will just pull some like random wise statement that is also super cutting out of his butt and then walk away and you're like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that I've been on the receiving end of too many of those.
I've been on the receiving end of that
Oh,
one.
okay. Is that
Maybe it's coming from my personal experiance.
I don't know. But yeah, no, I like, so at the end there, Aerie regenerates his arm for him. Cause she's like, obviously nobody's gonna kill him. They're not gonna put him back in the ground. But she's trying to do what she can that is within her abilities to make things
like,
right for him.
There's no way I can undo and fix this aside from murdering you right now. And she's not going to do that. Yeah. And so yeah, and I think it was a special little moment.
Yeah.
And...
Where she like, where he's like, look, don't look up to me like a hero anymore.
Yeah.
He's like, just like for all parties involved, just don't do that anymore. Because he's like, I'm done. He's like, Kurai Hikari may be alive, but Kai stays in the grave. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore. So yeah, that's gonna be.
And Aizawa has his nice little retort now that things are calmed down.
He's like, you do any of that again, I'm gonna break your leg. I'll break your legs.
I'm like, thank you, Aizawa. Right back to that nice, solid classroom management.
And for anybody who's doubting it, no, he will break Kurai's legs to make a point. He'll do it.
I mean, Aizawa is Aizawa. I love him.
Aizawa is Aizawa, and he's a mad Aizawa. Like, he has to be the rational one here.
Yeah.
He has to be the rational one in all of this insanity.
Okay, when you are teaching teenagers to begin with,
forget superpowered teenagers.
You have to be a savage. Like, and I mean, I'm talking from an elementary school perspective. I've watched these kids. Back doing student teachings and observations in middle and high school. Holy cow, and these kids are made of something different nowadays. Like, my 5th graders, Lord help their middle school teachers.
Oh boy.
Because holy cow, you have to be a savage to survive with these children. And so Aizawa is just like every year I love him even more because I'm just like, I have to embrace that level of savagery. And being a mom to toddlers helps because I can pull out the scary mom voice and scare the crap out of them. But it doesn't always work because they are total savages. And so I'm like, sometimes I wish I had Aizawa's power because I'm like...
It's like, Aizawa's always had to be the voice of reason to a degree, but now it's just like everything's kicked up to an 11.
Well, he knows he has to use some extra intensity with this extra intense child that he is responsible for. Because he is now the legal guardian of this child.
Yep.
Like, not only is he his teacher, but he is responsible for this kid. And so it's... He's stuck with him.
Aizawa's been dealt a very difficult hand in all of this.
Poor Dadzawa.
I feel so bad for I feel so bad for what I did to Dadzawa. I'm sorry.
And coming from and I've also watched fellow teachers adopt their kids and then watch them move into middle and high school, and it is so heavy and it's so different, like not only being their teacher but then becoming their parent, whether that kid accepts.
That's one of the things I like about Aizawa is that he hasn't tried to be Kurai's dad. He's like they had that talk like when the whole legal guardian issue was happening. He's like, just live according to the rules of the campus and we'll be good. He hasn't tried to step in and being Kurai's dad because just to call back to everything, Kurai's dad has only been dead for 5 or 6 months at this point.
And where do you go with that? This kid's dealing with so much trauma. There's you can't just step into that role when he barely knows you from Adam, aside from your teaching professional world, right?
Yeah.
So it's it's a wild ride.
Yeah. There's a lot happening emotionally in this chapter.
With everybody, man.
Yeah. I do hope that people did enjoy this chapter. I have a lot of personal investment in this one. Like I said, I kind of had to go to a dark place to pull this one together.
Yeah.
But I hope it did make for a compelling story.
So hopefully it'll get a little more interesting here on out.
Yeah. There's not gonna be a whole lot of throwing hands action happening in the next 2 chapters.
Arc, yeah.
But it is going to be. I mean, given everything that's happened, there has to be a dynamic shift, and we are going to have to explore what that entails.
And see like how is the plot going to move forward now that we have these elements. We have like suddenly this kid who in the hero course who's not planning on being a hero and going to change to another class in the next semester, and we have a new student, and a bunch of kids on campus know the truth. Some of them don't. And
some of them know that Kurai's alive. Others are still in the dark about that. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting.
Yes. And we have a functioning Akurui.
That's right. Sassy Boy is back. Sassy Boy is back.
I'm just really excited for you guys to finally experience this era of Akurui with me because oh my gosh.
And something that like minor spoiler that I'm gonna just throw you guys out. I'm just gonna throw you guys. I think this was a while ago, but I think somebody mentioned wanting to see Akurui and Mei Hatsume working together. They're gonna meet, and it's gonna be real interesting.
Their dynamic is my favorite thing ever.
That's your favorite thing?
It cracks me up, man.
It's pretty amusing to me.
The banter kills me.
Oh, man.
So anyway, I'm excited to hear what you guys think and what you are envisioning moving forward. And we're gonna go on vacation now. So bye.
So bye everybody. Hope you have a plus ultra couple of weeks, and we'll catch you on the next one.